Hello there, people of the internet. So this is actually a viewer request. A lot of people have, I've done a lot of World War II content as of lately, and I've had a couple of people ask me to go ahead and compare the M1 carbine right here to the AR platform. That being said, hello there, YouTube reviewer. How you doing today? I'm doing great. This right here is a semi-automatic rifle in full compliance with YouTube's community guidelines, and the magazine that we are using is not a standard capacity magazine. It is a 20 round capacity magazine, which is also in full compliance with YouTube's community guidelines. Okay, let's go ahead and get in on the subject. Obviously the AR platform is going to be a lot more modern than the M1 carbine, which was, well, it came out in World War II. And the AR platform came out, I don't know, late 50s, early 60s, sometime in that period. I'm not entirely sure where it went from development process to being available on the civilian market. Obviously it was available for military use, but not for the civilian markets. Obviously it was available for military use, but I'm not sure when it came out on the civilian market. I'm not sure if it was before or after military adoption. I'm pretty sure it was before, but I can't say for certain. So I'm gonna go ahead and just say I flat on don't know. Okay, so M1 carbine, lots of good, lots of bad. By today's standard, this right here is more of a PCC, meaning a pistol caliber carbine, than it would be like an intermediate rifle caliber like the 223-556 would be. The 30 caliber carbine is a very powerful round though, but it's not like rifle powerful round. If we're talking pistol calibers, definitely a potent round, definitely a powerful round. It has roughly the same, ballistically speaking, roughly the same transfer of energy at 100 yards as a 357 revolver would have at the barrel. So it's definitely not an insignificant amount of power. But like I said, it's not like rifle level of power. This right here went side by side with the 30-06 and the 308 for a lot of years. So yeah, the 308 and 30-06 are obviously much more potent cartridges. The 223-556 is not quite as large of a round. Typically the M1 carbine is going to fire about a 110 grain bullet approximately if you're using full metal jackets and, you know, standard military ball ammunition, whereas the 223-556 is going to fire, typically, standard speaking, either 55 grain or 62 grain. Of course, there's so many different loadings out there. You can get yourself some heavier 70 some odd grain bullets or some lighter 40 grain projectiles. I have seen those. Those tend to travel really fast. But typically, if you're going to use the AR platform for whatever it is that you're going to be using it for, unless you are looking for some specialty ammunition, you're going to be rocking either 55 grain or 62 grain projectiles. These projectiles are moving very quickly. Out of a full-length rifle barrel, it's going to be traveling 55 grain about 32-ish 100 feet per second, which is quite substantial. Now your 30 caliber carbine, which is, like I said, a much less potent round, is going to only travel about 2,000 or so feet per second. Maybe a little bit less. It all really just depends on the loading that you're using. But all in all, I would consider it to be not as powerful as the 223-556. It just delivers less energy on target, especially out to a further distance. If you are in, I don't know, a place where you have to worry about like over penetration, or a place where you don't necessarily have to touch out to far distances, like with where I'm at, I could easily touch out to 500 yards or so in any direction if I see a threat coming at me. So having a 5.56 223 would be a better option than a 30 caliber carbine out of a M1 carbine. If you are in like a city area or something like that, and a full power 5.56 would not necessarily be the best option, then a 30 caliber carbine, M1 carbine, is definitely going to be a good option for you if you don't have to touch out past 300 yards. They can touch out past 300 yards. Somebody's going to go in the comments and tell me that they took out a rhinoceros at 1,000 yards with one of these with a single shot, you know, right to the eye with their eyes closed, having already done a 360, and there's all sorts of stories that go on in the comments section of my YouTube channel. But generally speaking, max range of about 300 yards or so with the M1 carbine. Max range, like we're talking effective range, average shooter could pull off, I'd say about 5, maybe 600 yards. With the AR223 5.56, of course you can go further if you know how to do that, but we're talking average shooter here. Everyone always goes into the comments and tells me about the exception of the one guy that did something absolutely incredible, like how Jerry Miculek can shoot at 1,000 yards with a 22 long rifle handgun and hit his target with one single shot. Fantastic. I'm not Jerry Miculek, neither are you, unless you are Jerry Miculek, in which case, hi Jerry, big fan. Alright, 5.56, 223 AR platform, or just the AR platform in general. I guess it doesn't have to be 5.56, 223. Generally speaking, the AR platform can be, well, it's a very, what's the word I'm looking for here? Universal? I guess that's the word I'll use. It's a very universal platform that can host a variety of cartridges. I see some kind of critter running around in my yard, and I don't think it's an animal that is mine. It kind of looks like a possum. Possum stew for dinner? Nah, I don't feel like cleaning a possum. Welcome to Florida. But what was I saying? The 5.56 223 AR platform doesn't necessarily have to be 5.56 223. The AR platform can host a variety of different cartridges, or you get yourself a AR-10 and have like 6.5 Creedmoor, 308, whatever large caliber it is that you're wanting, versus the M1 carbine, which is specifically stuck with 30 caliber carbine ammunition. I mean, there are like modern production M1 carbines, which are like 22 long rifle and 9mm and things like that, but you're not going to have anywhere close to the host of variety that the AR platform would have. You can also swap out your cartridges and your, what's the word I'm looking for? You can swap out your caliber for your AR platform very, very easy versus the M1 carbine, which, like, if you wanted a 9mm M1 carbine, you'd have to get a whole other M1 carbine. You couldn't just swap that out. But this 223 5.56 AR right here, if I wanted, say, a 300 blackout or something, I could literally just swap out the barrel for a 300 blackout. And I mean, the bolt's the same, the head spacing and whatnot, that should all be good. I recommend checking your head spaces whenever you swap out any caliber. But for all intensive purposes, or intents and purposes, both those are correct, but I got yelled at in the comments for saying either one of those ways. It is not hard to swap the caliber on an AR platform. Typically, you just swap out the barrel. For some calibers, you're gonna have to swap out the bolt. For like very specific calibers, you might have to swap out the lower receiver, depending on if your mag well can, you know, depending on what it is that you're wanting to go for. But there's a lot of different calibers that you can run in the AR platform without having to do a lot of work. Now, on your modern AR platforms, we're going to talk about modern AR platforms, not like retro builds or anything like that. I'm going to have somebody go down in the comments and be like, I've got a 1972 AR that does not have the things you're talking about, so you're a liar. And guys, that's the exception. There's always going to be somebody who points out the exception and tells me I'm wrong, because there is an exception. There will always be an exception. But most of your modern AR platforms are going to have some way to mount some sort of optic on your AR, versus the M1 carbine, which does not exactly have the easiest way to mounting optic on that. You could remove your rear sight and like get a Picatinny rail or something for that. Like, there's aftermarket ways of doing it, but there's not really any good aftermarket ways of doing it. You can mount optics. If you have yourself a full rail like I do, you can mount iron sights with an optic. This way, if your optic goes down, you still have your iron sights to go to. If you remove your iron sight in order to mount an optic on your M1 carbine, iron sight's going to be gone, so there's not much that you can do if your optic goes down. What the hell is that? We just had something make some noise over there. If you get yourself a handguard that has some kind of rail system on it, like M-Lock or Keymod or something like that, you'll be able to mount a host of variety of attachments. In this case, I got a flashlight mounted to the side. I got a Picatinny rail, because Picatinny rails are a lot easier to find shit for than M-Lock. I got me just a quick detached sling swivel right here, in the event that I feel like shoving a sling onto this thing, which I have done on numerous occasions. And the beauty about this is I can put that sling swivel absolutely anywhere I want to go ahead and match up with whatever kit it is that I'm wearing. If I decide to wear a kit, It's just such a universal design, and you can go ahead and do absolutely anything with it, versus the M1 Carbine, which needs a specific kind of sling right here. If you don't have an M1 Carbine sling, then you won't be able to mount the M1 Carbine because it has a proprietary sling system. It does have a front sling mount, but you can't just go and do like a simple hook sling or something unless you're going to actually like taking aftermarket sling swivel and drill it into this bastard, and I would not recommend doing that. I mean, if you want to get yourself an M1 Carbine over the AR platform for practical purposes, it's just not feasible nowadays, especially because of the next topic, price point. M1 Carbine right here, these things are starting to go like they're getting very collectible, and they're starting to go for pretty insane amounts of money. And I've seen M1 Carbines, just like standard base model M1 Carbines, these typically go for around $1,000, but people are asking even more for them. And it's crazy to think about because people tell me all the time back in like the 80s and 90s, they'd be able to pick one of these up for like $100 from a barrel outside of Sears. And I bet everybody regrets not absolutely stockpiling these because these have become collectible. And they're no longer for cheap, practical purposes like back in the 80s and 90s. If you just needed a gun to handle whatever it is that you wanted to handle, like, hey, I'm going camping, and if we come across any boar or bears or something like that, well, I wouldn't recommend taking on a bear with an M1 Carbine. I'd recommend the Grand or something like that, or Garand, however it is you feel like pronouncing it, or Carbine, Carbine, however it is you feel like pronouncing that. I always get yelled at in the comments for how I pronounce things. I don't care, guys. But back then, whenever they were dirt cheap and not collectible items, then yeah, they were absolutely practical for what it is that you were wanting to do with it, as long as they could handle the purposes of what you were wanting to do. Don't, you know, try sniping with this thing at 1,000 yards, but it could handle whatever most situations you were going to come across back whenever they were cheap. Now that they're $1,000 in collectible, holy crap, guys, you can get yourself a good entry-level AR for like $400 or so. And if you have $1,000 budget, you can get a lot of mags and a lot of ammunition and accessories and a mag pouch and a sling and detachments, and you can get yourself a lot of stuff for your AR platform than you can over the M1 Carbine platform for the same amount of money, just because these right here have become such a prolifically, I can't find the word I'm looking for, but everybody has one. They're very, very much all over the place, unless you're living in a communist state or something like that. If you are living in a restrictive state, then I would absolutely recommend getting yourself like an SKS or something like that, a Ruger Mini 14, something that isn't as expensive as the M1 Carbine. The SKS firing 7.62x39, very, very effective 10-round magazine. You get yourself aftermarket magazines to hold more ammunition, fed by stripper clip. The ammunition is cheap versus the M1 Carbine, which is getting to be like $1 a round at this point. It's becoming specialty ammunition. There's just better options out there, even if you're living in a restrictive state, than the M1 Carbine. I figure the next best thing to do, ergonomics. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the ergonomics of both platforms. So the AR, very, very ergonomic rifle. If you're out there running and gunning, bang, 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 out of ammunition, magazine release is right here on the receiver. Drop your mag, grab a new one, push that bastard up in there, and while you're in the process of doing that, you can actually push the bolt release, which will launch the bolt forward, chamber around, you're ready to go, bang, 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 back into action, right? Versus the mag release that is on the M1 Carbine here, which is actually in front of the trigger guard down here. Not exactly the hardest to get to, but you definitely have to break your grip angle, or at least I do. If your hand size is different than mine, then you might not have to worry about that. Whenever you get the magazine out, if you're going through after you get yourself another magazine, you pop that bad boy in there, make sure that bastard's seated in. You can go ahead and pull your charging handle back and load yourself another round, and go ahead and continue doing whatever it is that you were doing with your M1 Carbine, whether or not you're at the range, or I don't know, maybe it's 1944 and you're in Europe. I don't know what you were doing with your M1 Carbine, but you do have to break your grip from either your trigger grip right here or your supporting hand right here. Go over it, maybe AK-47 style your charging handle there, but you do have to break one of your grips in order to grab the charging handle, pull it back, let it go forward, and There's no kind of automatic bolt release that would allow the bolt to just sling forward, not on your M1 carbines, or at least not on this one. Maybe some modern manufacturers have it on their M1 carbines, but not to my knowledge. So neither of these rifles have particularly harsh recoil, but if you're running an AR platform that is not 5.56 and maybe it's like an AR-10 platform or something, and it has something that kicks a little bit harder, the inline system, just the way the recoil in the gun operates, the way all the moving parts operate off of one general axis that goes right back into your shoulder, it just makes recoil really easy to handle on these rifles versus the M1 carbine, which is actually above where your shoulder is. So you do get a little bit more rise, but man, it's so insignificant anyway that it's not really worth mentioning. But I'm sure somebody in the comments is going to talk about the bore of axis. I'm not sure if I'm saying that properly or not. How all the recoil on the AR goes directly back into your shoulder versus the M1 carbine, which is actually a little bit above. All the moving parts are a little bit above your shoulder, which increases rise slightly. I also want to say I very much prefer the safety on the AR platform. Just a little switch right here on the side of the receiver versus the M1 carbine, which is a little push button underneath where the trigger guard is. There's been a couple of times where I thought I was flicking the safety and I ended up just hitting the magazine release instead, and I dropped my mag. And in the event that I was in Europe in 1944, that's not something that I would want to do, especially if I was in the heat of the moment handling whatever it is that I was trying to handle there. So 5 rounds downrange, AR platform, optic, red dot sight in this particular case. Very simple, very easy. Since I have this M-LOK rail system on my handguard, I got a flashlight on it. If it was dark, I'd be able to spot targets pretty easily with that flashlight. Of course, I would also myself be a target. Bear that in mind, but we're not gonna get into that. I mostly use that flashlight right there on this rifle for, like, if there's freaking trouble outside, coyotes, raccoons in my garbage, just things like that. Now, the biggest downside with the M1 carbine that we're probably gonna see here, you have no choice but to use your iron sights. That's not the biggest downside. I will show you the biggest downside. I will say whenever it is the biggest downside. We're probably going to see it here, though. You will have to use your iron sights, so if you're not good with iron sights, then you're going to have some trouble. Not a lot of recoil. But here's our downside. The M1 carbine is not very reliable. Now, you might get yourself one that is very reliable. This one is not one of those. On the bright side, though, whenever it doesn't cycle like that, it's very easy to find the brass for reloading purposes later. Okay, did I chamber around? I did not chamber around. This particular M1 carbine is not very reliable. I've tried all sorts of magazines. I've tried new production. I've tried old production. I've tried actual GI surplus mags. I've tried 30-round mags. I've tried all sorts of stuff. This one right here is just not reliable. I've cleaned it. I've oiled it. I've lubricated it. You know, just go down in the comments. Tell me what it is that I need to do with this thing. I'll say, hey, I've already done it. But I already know exactly why this thing's not reliable. The magazine catch itself, the magazine release, it's just not holding it in properly. Yeah, that's the problem. We either combine that with the extractor itself. The extractor on this particular one is a little on the weak side, which is why we had a failure to extract on our last shot. Combine the failures to extract with the failures to feed, and this M1 carbine is very much not reliable. This was just like a luck of the draw thing whenever I had gotten it. I got it at a pretty good price, so I'm not exactly complaining about it. I can still put down 30 caliber carbine ammunition, and I mean, it works, it goes bang, it just doesn't cycle very well, so essentially it becomes a bolt action. Like this one right here. This is exactly what I mean. There is a failure to feed. We had a successful cycling run, but failure to feed. So we just gotta adjust it. And if you are fighting someone out of your house using this for defensive purposes, that's not something that I'd want to do. Another failure to extract. Now, these can be made into very reliable firearms, and like I said, if you have one that's reliable, hey, good for you. This one is not. This is just standard ball ammunition that I'm using, by the way. It's not like these are hollow points or soft points or something like that, although I do use soft points for hunting for obvious reasons. But they still tend to not cycle very well. Another failure to extract. Get that out of there. All right. Of course, whenever I bought this, of course, it is used, and I have no idea what this thing has gone through, what it's seen, what it's done. So that being said, I'm not surprised that it's got some issues, and I bet if I replace the extractor, I would definitely see much better results with this thing. But I am making shots on target. That's what matters. And I'm also managing to gather my brass as well. Whenever I shoot semi-automatics, like I'm using like reloadable brass ammunition, I will try to collect the brass, but of course you're just going to lose some in the grass and whatnot. But whenever you have a rifle like this, it just consistently malfunctions. That's not much of a problem. Now this I wouldn't use for defensive purposes. Did we actually cycle that time? I'll be damned, we actually cycled. Alright, failure to cycle on that one. Well, I guess I'm not going to use that brass case because it's been damaged. Although I would not use this for defensive purposes, I will... Oh, hold on, I found... Oh, never mind. That's an 8mm Mauser case. Non-reloadable 8mm Mauser. Although I would not use this for defensive purposes, this right here would make a fantastic little hunting rifle. I'm not really all that concerned about having to essentially use this thing, operate this thing like it's a bolt action versus having it be semi-automatic. Whenever I'm out there hunting, you know, just one good clean shot. Most of our deer around here only get to be 120 to 150 pounds here in northern Florida. We got really small deer here. And for the most part, I'd be going after like pigs or something. Those are much more common to come across in the event that you are taking something on. Well, you see what I'm dealing with here. You're not going to be making shots past 100 yards in the jungles of Florida. So the M1 Carbine, it's so lightweight and so handy and so capable, and there's not much recoil, and it's just such a good option for hunting purposes. And whenever I replace the extractor in this thing and I replace the magazine release, I'm sure that this thing right here is going to start feeding and operating 100% better than it is now. But that's just the nature of the beast with the M1 Carbine. They're notorious for not being very reliable. There are good ones out there. I will say that there are good ones out there, but there's a lot of not so good ones out there. If you get yourself an AR platform, especially like a modern made one, and you end up having issues with it, 9 times out of 10 you can send it back to the company with whoever it is sold it to you. They'll be like, all right, we'll go ahead and we'll take care of that, we'll fix it, we'll get it up and going where it is properly running. Although for the most part they test fire them in the factory and make sure that they are, you know, cycling well and up to par and good to go before they go ahead and send them out the door. That's just becoming common practice nowadays. Alright, well, this was actually a pretty fun little video to make. I have no idea where those other 30 caliber carbine empty shells went, but I got 4 of them. How many shots did I shoot? Like 7 minus 1, which was destroyed. So I got 2 out here that are just sitting in the dirt somewhere. No idea where they're at. Alright, 4 is good enough for me, I guess. Well, folks, thanks for watching. I do appreciate your time. Speaking of time, I got something I got to go handle. So, yeah, alright. I appreciate you guys sticking by. This is a video that a ton of people have been wanting me to make. They wanted me to compare the AR-15 to the M1 Carbine. So I went ahead and I did that. We did exactly that out here on the range. There's not, I mean, we're comparing apples to oranges here. We're talking about a PCC versus an intermediate caliber rifle. But people wanted me to do it, so I went ahead and I did it. So, hey guys, thanks for watching. I do appreciate your time. Like the channel, subscribe, or like the video, subscribe to the channel. Description down below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go ahead and go check that out. I'm gonna go hydrate with some whiskey. Yeah, I'm gonna go do that. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I do hope that you guys enjoyed this as much as I did, because I did have a fun time, despite the fact that my M1 Carbine doesn't work very well. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.